Okay. We did it!
Yay!
Can you hear
Oh
me?
wait, this is happening right now, isn't it?
Yeah, welcome to the internet. You're live. You're live on the internet. See
We're gonna
one.
just sneak me in here.
Yeah, no, I like to do it like Pete Holmes does it this way. Like he hits record and then the guest walks in and then he starts chit chatting and at some point in the first 5 minutes they're like, "Wait, did we start?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and then they just keep going.
Weird, I forgot
Yeah,
this was even happening.
and you can tell zero people are watching, right? Can you see that?
Um,
For me, I
no.
have an overlay. Okay, great. So zero people are watching. But that's why we're here, because step one is start at the time you said you were going to start on the calendar and in Discord. Step two is make a Discord and to tweet about it. So, um, would you make a tweet or whatever, and then I can post that something like it in Discord and maybe even Telegram.
Where
Or
am I
so, are you
situated?
mad? This is the 2022 background.
No. I have like decided this is the general background. This is
Oh,
our
this is evergreen.
yeah,
I'm with it.
because I think it was I think it's technically like the 2020 background.
Yeah.
Are we doing this every Thursday?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, hi. Chat overlay. You can say hi, and it'll even show on the screen. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
What's up, chat? Just referring to you by your general name, chat. So impersonal. Beam! Let's fucking go.
He's the only
See,
one that cares.
I only need one person for it to be a stream, and that person is exactly Beam. I don't mean one general person. I need exactly Beam. What up, Beam? We're starting just like the Reiko one. We're trying to figure out what to tweet. What juicy tweet? Laura, how's the tweet? Bada boom.
It just automatically does the thing, right?
It does the thing.
You
Join us
can't.
live right now. Okay, great. So I'm gonna. What should I put in Discord? Hey, join us on twitch.tv, Ethereum Denver, to learn UX design. Join at Laura and I. Ah.
It's Lura.
Right now. No, in our Discord, you are
Oh,
Laura. Feel free to change it.
no, that's fine. I think my Discord username is Lur. You know, from Futurama.
Mm-hmm.
Lur.
Lur.
Lur. And his
Um,
Jur.
and do you think it would be a best practice to post about this in Telegram?
Sure, why not? I have mixed feelings.
Twitch.tv, Ethereum Denver. Okay. We did our due diligence. Tweet,
Mhm.
Discord, Telegram. Button it up. Now we can actually get in.
Mm.
Um, Laura,
Yes,
you're my special guest today.
sure.
Specifically, um, Beam was here earlier this week when we did front end and knows Space Falcon. Yo, good to see you. You are the king of writing emails. Um, what the way we do these is I'm lazy and naive, and so I get to model what being a good learner is, and we get to do it together. And the way I usually do that is I find a human or an internet resource that knows a lot more than me, and then just let them or it explain things to me one piece at a time. So I
So
wanna
wait,
I wanna know UX design. How do I learn it? And why are you qualified to talk about it for those who don't know your background?
okay. So my background is actually an illustration from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I did get my UX UI certificate, but that was also like 2.5, 3 years ago. So I don't
Only
know if I'm the right person.
you're making it sound like you're a dinosaur.
Well, no, graduating college was 2015, but like my certificate course was like 2, 3 years ago, and
Hmm.
I didn't like go into it, so I've applied it minorly. I don't think I'm the
Okay,
best person for this.
so
Let's go
you
for it.
here we go. So you would definitely not call yourself an expert by any
No.
stretch. You have learned the fundamentals at one point a few years ago. So if we took a look at stuff, it'd be the kind of thing where it's all coming back to me, like that kind of a vibe.
Let's see. Let's see
Ideally.
what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yes,
I'll defer to you. I don't know thing one about design. Here's what I do know. I do know thing one that there are roughly speaking two categories of design, two giant umbrellas. What I thought design was is referred to as graphic design, illustration. It's where you make things visually beautiful and choose color palettes and think of things like white space or that. There's this whole thing that comes way before that called like UX and user stories and making sure before you decide what color to make things, you decide who it's for, what do they need, why am I making it at all, and what kind of interactions would make sense to that person. What is that called?
so that
Is it
would
like
be a
UX?
bit of UX UI, and a bit of marketing research, which actually kind of goes pretty hand in hand with all of them.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest things that you need to define is like the differences between UX and UI.
Yeah, sure.
And so UX is more like user research and product strategy and like how it works, right? And UI is more like color theory, the typography, the design, and like how it's laid out. And then they overlap, they come together.
Okay. So in the context of a hackathon or a bidilathon like ETH Denver, people come together, they've got some idea. Um, an example of a hackathon I participated in earlier this year, somebody on our team had the idea. It's like Kickstarter, but when people donate, uh, instead of the founders getting all the money, they only get a chunk, and then all the people who donated vote on whether to give them the next chunk. Okay, that's an idea. You might naively skip all the way to let's make the smart contracts, let's make the website. But what would design have to say about what we do before we jump there?
Design would have like you would be needing to make your choices of what it's going to look like, how it's going to function, and how somebody's going to interact with it.
Okay. And that's this UX part, like figuring out who's going to use it and what they expect and making designing it sort of with them in mind rather than just like I'm just
Right,
going to make a thing with buttons because whatever buttons I make people will click them, right? Like sort of
right.
using empathy and interviews and research to understand how to make it best for that kind of person. Am I hearing
Right.
that right?
So, like, if you've ever been to a website where um, it doesn't have a nav bar, but then the what is called like the hamburger menu, like the 3-line menu,
Uh-huh.
is also not in its usual place of the upper right-hand corner. Like, have you ever been to one where it's like kind of like in the middle lower corner, or like in the
Sure.
middle of the screen?
I hate that.
It's just like it's about intuitive behaviors of humans and like what is natural. So like if you're walking down the stairs and it's an old building and the steps are like 2 inches shorter than what is the average, you're gonna
Mm.
notice it. You're gonna fumble. You're gonna like trip. But it's intuitive for you to take those steps and not even pay attention on a daily.
Okay, so there's something in there about conforming to a standard.
Yeah.
Like in Web3, very common across dApps is this connect wallet in the top right corner. You click it, and it gives you maybe some options, MetaMask, others. You click it, sign a message, and then you're connected. It updates on the top right, shows your wallet, and you're like, oh, I'm connected now. That flow at this point is established. And so if I'm making something from scratch, I'm probably going to do something like that because anything else would be confusing for people.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And if there's anything new that you do want to make, you need to test that out. And you can't just like throw it out there on the website and be like, go for it, or on your app or whatever. You want to use the people around you. Like, you don't have to hire a marketing team. You don't have to like go out there and find strangers. You could literally just take your app to your parents, to your grandparents. They're the best people because they are so disconnected from technology most of the time that if they can't use it, it's a problem. Like, your average person might have a little bit of a struggle with it too.
So you're saying even if
they can't like figure it out.
Okay, so if there's a bell curve, I think about it like this. Like, I'm very tall, and so when I get in a car, it's obvious to me if that car does not accommodate tall people. So if I were a car designer, I would think, rather than make sure my car takes care of 98% of people, I'm actually going to design it so that the 1% shortest people and the 1% tallest people are both fine, and everything in the middle is going to take care of itself as a result of that.
Yeah.
So you're saying design it so that the people who are least familiar, you make the least assumptions about their background knowledge, and if they can have a good time and use it smoothly, then other people will be taken care of.
Yeah.
Oh. Because that caught me off guard. I was like, well, why would I interview them if they aren't my main demographic, if they're not the like most common user I think is going to be using this thing?
Right. And it really does depend on like what exactly you're making. But it's mostly just because of exactly that. It's just the easier that it is for the majority of people, the more successful your app or your website or whatever it is going to be. It's just, people don't spend longer than 10 to 15 seconds on a landing page. If they can't figure out who you are, what you're doing, and how to navigate your website within those 10 to 15 seconds, they're gone. They're gone. Nope.
Okay. By the way, I put the little chat thingy here because whenever I do anything like our Twitter community calls or this, like, I prefer for it to be conversational. So like Space Falcon, Beam, Simple, and Milcha, if you have any questions or comments, like, please throw them in here. This can easily be like a back and forth kind of thing. So let's begin at the beginning. If I wanted to get to a place where I guess we're beginning at the end. My goal is to be able to walk into a hackathon and say, hi, I could help with the design parts. What do people think I mean? Like, what set of skills am I bringing to the table so that they're like, oh, sweet, a designer. Now we can count on you to do blank, blank, and blank to talk to the developer and the whatever. Like, if you had to really try and summarize, like, well, you better know blank, blank, and blank at a very high level.
So that one's hard for me to answer because I've been noticing that there's a huge difference between the way that I approach the word design and the way that a lot of developers approach the word design. And the way it's just, when I say design, I do mean the aesthetics. I do mean the graphics and everything like that. And other people think more like back-end development and front-end development. So I guess, are you going to be, I guess I don't really know how to answer that. Like, are you following up like with specifics on what you can design? Like,
Or yeah, so let's imagine I'm a front end developer. I know how to make a website. I can make a simple database, like I can handle the like back end at this. I'm full stack. I mostly do front end, and I can make like some kind of an Airtable to store like user data if I need to. I'm not making like servers from scratch or anything, but I can take care of the data. And then I have a cool idea, but I'm like, I hate choosing colors. I hate designing layouts. I don't want to have to make any decisions about design. So on a spectrum of like idea to website that works, I'm capable of doing a lot of that end stuff, like making the website however I was told it should look. I can make it look that way. What are the pieces where my skill set ends that I'm looking for somebody else to come and complement?
okay, so you should be expected to be able to like lay out a page at least somewhat to make it look like kind of like a really mundane magazine, you know, just like you should be able to do the navigation, you should be able to link everything, you should be able to do make it somewhat of a functioning website, right?
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is there's the not the naive, like there's the trope of the designer that hates or excuse me, the web developer that hates thank you. Dog walker's back. Um a lot of developers are like, I hate design. Oh, I don't want to choose colors. Oh, don't make me think about it. So these kinds of people, to give them the benefit of the doubt, are like, listen, if you give me a high res Figma page that's pixel perfect and has all the colors and stuff, I can definitely code up UI elements in React or whatever front end framework. If you need it to be a green button right here with these rounded corners and this text centered like that with that padding, I can do all that. Just tell me what you need done and I'm happy to execute. So assume that I know how to make it, but maybe I'm just like, I wish I had somebody on my team to decide how it should look, because I hate having to be the person who makes it and the person who decides how it should look.
Right.
I personally agree with, like, there's this streamer Theo who's a developer and a founder. He's of the opinion front end devs should have design chops, because
You
the
should
whole
have at
thing
least
you
a little bit.
do is make front ends. And if you make front ends and you're like, but I don't want to decide how it looks, that's like being a sculptor that's like, just tell me what statue to make and then I'll sculpt it. It's like,
So
no.
like when we were redoing our website, and we were using our Webflow person, I was noticing, like, you should have at that point some basic understanding of the way of aesthetics and the way that, like, if there's a paragraph here and you put a button here, that it looks better if the
Yeah.
button's here.
Yeah.
And you should have an understanding of hierarchy of information, that like if you have this giant paragraph, you should have like a bigger text with
Like
like
a
at least
header.
describing, yeah, header, like
Hmm.
highlighting some key information. Like you should have those skills. You should have a foundation of where the image and something is like off like this, that you just like boop, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
But of course you're going to have an actual designer come through that is going to check everything off. It is going to be like, you need to move this over like 2 spaces. Like you're going to have somebody come through and put the cherry on top of the sundae, but you should be able to build the rest of the sundae.
Yeah. Because sort of the two lenses we're using here, and then I want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the beauty coming up in chat. One lens is like, if I were at a full-fledged company, say like, like an Oracle or like a Facebook, something huge, there's a pipeline. You've got like the product managers, and then you've got like designers doing all the interviews, and then you've got other designers that are really good illustrators making it, like getting it pixel perfect, and then they would pass it to the front end people that just implement and make no decisions about how it looks. And it would be very segmented. So that's one lens, like medium to large team. In the ultra small team context of a hackathon, you're going to have a lot more overlap, a lot more like full stack, where like I'm the front end person, but unless I've got a good designer, I'm also the graphic designer by default. I need to choose the colors
In
and what
a
kinds of buttons and
small
so on.
team, it is going to be a graphic designer. In a small team, it's just.
Mm-hmm.
I've even experienced in a company of less than 20 that it is going to be the graphic designer, because there are too many steps between the UX, UI, and graphic design people and any other artist that, or person that is going to, okay it. There are too many steps there that like smaller companies, and especially for a Bitaline team, you don't have enough time. So most of the time it is going to be the graphic designer doing it, unless you have a UI person that knows how to be more creative and make everything aesthetically pleasing. Not necessarily saying you can't succeed as a Bitaline team without a graphic designer. You definitely can. You don't need to have everything perfect in order to have a successful app and website to win as a Bitaline team, right?
Right.
These types of things, you can get it to a point where it's functioning and you can have people use it and you can notice the things that people are staring at, the things that, the comments that are made, like the layout is weird, things like that. You notice that over time and you can learn to adjust. You can compare your product to a product that is similar and you can learn to adjust. You can learn to make something, the juxtaposition of something, look good. You can learn that.
Yes.
Most of the time you just have to trust your gut. That is the biggest thing I've noticed, is that people get very, oh, I'm not a designer, I'm not an artist, like I don't know when something looks good. And it's just like, but what do you think? Like if the buttons get off centered a little bit, like what do you think it needs? Like
benefit of the doubt, like different people have different tastes. Like you might literally not have taste for that. Like I used to be the person that was like, I don't know what to wear. I'll just do whatever like my mom or my friends or my girlfriend think looks cool. Like I don't have strong opinions on fashion. And then I started paying attention to it more and more. And slowly I was like, my shirts are too tight. I do like floral stuff. I do like collars. Never unbuttoned. Chest hair's gauche. And I like slowly but surely developed my personal tastes. So some of that is like personal taste. And then some of it is more like foundational principles about like composition. Like there's such a thing as just like too tight, too hectic. And everyone would agree, like, unless you're going for like a maximalist vibe, you probably need to dial back and have more white space here. But how much white space, that's the subjectivity, right? And there might be some good rules of thumb or something.
There always are. I mean, there's so much that you can learn about like the kerning and like just...
Kerning?
Yeah.
Define kerning for people that don't know. I happen to know, but
I need to like look it up because
no, it's not that hard. It's like in typography, you know how like letters, right? Like an alphabet.
It perfectly. Okay, so like it's the
imagine
space
like a capital A.
It's like the space in between the letters and like the way that like a letter, like a word can look so squished. And it actually comes from like the typewriter. You can adjust kernings like, and
I didn't know that.
if you look at some like really old books from like the 40s and the 30s, and sometimes that's like the text is just like so squished together. And yeah, just starting with typography, in my opinion, will help with pretty much any of that. And I do believe Falcon said here about a dev becoming a great visual designer. I do believe that because you're constantly looking at and working on different apps, different websites, and different things. You intuitively start learning, whether you notice it or not. Like it's start noticing what looks good, because you see websites and you're like, wow, this is crap. Wow, this website is great. Like if you're looking at,
I mean, we've all used apps, and then like here's just to sort of skip to user research for a second. We've all used apps where you like pressed something to go into a menu, and then like tried to swipe back to where you were from the left side of the screen, because again, that's an extremely common design pattern. And then you realized you're not allowed to do that, and you either had to click like a left arrow at the top left or press like a home icon on that bottom row to go back to where you were, and you're like, why did they do that? And there's this visceral moment of like, why is it like that? And that's the kind of thing where as the designer you're like, well, of course they're going to hit the back button. It's sitting there staring them in the face. And then you watch somebody use your thing and they're like, and then they do it, and you're like, oh, that was the moment. Watch the video in slow-mo. They went, we need to add that. Like, even if we keep our other thing, we need to add that. And there's this give and take where you're like, here's what I think you should do. And then they play with it, and they're like, well, here's what I expected. And then you like sort of adjust accordingly.
Exactly. But then there's also the question, like, why wasn't that arrow noticeable? Like, not only is it the intuitive thing, which is always what you should go for, right? But then there's the whole like, why didn't they see the arrow? Was that arrow not the right color? Was it in a weird place? Like, was there something else right next to it that was distracting from it? Because if the arrow is noticeable enough, then somebody is just going to go click on that arrow immediately too.
Memory Gardens asked, Laura, what about opportunity costs? Could you elaborate on that? In what context
Yeah.
are you talking about opportunity costs? Because what that evokes for me is to sort of give us like a high level, like where are we? How does this fit into the whole conversation? I've heard like a tweet joke that was along the lines of like, yeah, there you go, dev doing design work. Like hire a designer because it'll save you like 2x on your development time. Like if you choose the right thing to design in the beginning, then you won't waste a bunch of development time. I'm literally a part of a project right now where they did a bunch of development time and then showed us like, okay, we're ready to launch. And then some of our team members that had contracted them were like, I don't like this. Can we change it? And they're like, why didn't you say that before we built it? So
Yeah, because
that's the power of having a designer. But I'll finish the joke. It's like, if you have a designer, that saves you 2x on your dev work. If you have a strategist, that can save you 2x on your design work, because that's even a step before. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who is it for? Then you get into, okay, who is going to use it and how should we make it for them? So there's layers.
Exactly.
Don't just build a thing.
No, you can't just build a thing. You need to think, like you were saying, you have to think further ahead in order to start. Like I've noticed a lot that devs just like, they're like, oh, this is great. And they just like dive right in. But like you were saying, who are you building this for? What is the need? What is the hole in the industry? Like you have to think about what is it going to look in the end in order to start developing it to save time. Yeah.
So let's I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in some of these terms, but I know them at a conversational level. So thank you, Memory Gardens, for adding layers here. So
yeah, I don't remember the terms either. Oops, sorry.
It's okay. So Memory Gardens is asking us to think about the opportunity cost of a dev doing design work, partly through the lens that you're paying devs more per hour than designers usually, but also more importantly in just like the product development pipeline. You've got a familiar old school way of doing it called waterfall. Like you do all of your design here and then they're done, and then all of the development starts and then they're done, and then you do all the marketing and then you launch and then you're done, and each step is siloed, right? This would be in complete contrast to, for example, an agile perspective where the goal is to get users involved from the beginning and then through the entire process, where you can like ask them for feedback and then give them a low res click model, like you were telling me before this, like literal pieces of paper, and then all the way up to the part where you've got a website. You're still asking them to interact with it so they can be like, yeah, but it's ugly, and like why don't you have this in the nav bar like I expected? And then so it's that iterative thing with the users every step of the way.
In like a really ideal world, you have the design, you have the development, you have the market research, you have the design, you have the development, you have the launch. The quicker that you can get something in front of somebody, the better. But in order to do that, most devs feel like they have to put all this time in to develop the thing. But we are taught to just start with paper and a pencil. You can either make your app with like cutting out what looks like an iPhone and like all the little pieces, and like when you flip the screen, you move and you put a piece of paper that is the next screen. When you click the hamburger menu, you put the piece of paper that is the drop down. When you make the website, you have it's basically like a mind map, and it's all each of the pages of the website, and you can draw like squares where images are going to be and circles or buttons, things like that. Like you need to get it, you need a storyboard, you need to get it out of your brain. And if your dev is a different person, then they can like kind of see where you're going with it. They can either do something in Figma or they can start building it. And then ideally devs and graphic designer or whoever your designer is could work together. Dev could get like so far and then be like, what do you think of this? And the designer will be like this, that, and that. Then the dev comes back through. That's what I've noticed is the most ideal way to do it. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily say it's efficient time-wise, but it definitely is money-wise because there's a lot less you have to go
Hmm.
back and fix.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering, because we're always like shifting perspectives, like high level ideal version, you have all the time in the world, all the money in the world, all the team members with all the skills. To come back to this hackathon lens, one thing I've heard as a response to all the things we're saying is I've got 2 or 3 days to ship my thing at most hackathons. ETH Denver bounties will be available from February 20th, and then projects are due March 5th. That's like going on 2 weeks of time, actually. So
Yeah,
everything I'm about to say, not even relevant if you're doing your job right there. But
right,
I don't have time to go do market research. I don't have time to get feedback from real users on my click model.
right.
And so I'm just gonna skip that. I'm gonna like come up with my Figma, like Fractal Visions is saying. You do like your UI, UX, you do your storyboarding, and then you're like, okay, here's like it's an app, here's landing page, here's like profile page, just go make it. And then they go make it, and then they're like, we're done.
Yeah.
Memory Gardens is saying,
And
why
that
not? Why don't you have time? Why can't you run surveys before the hackathon?
it depends on if you've, got your team and your project and your idea lined up or not. If you don't, then you're kind of like screwed. And you can use your team members as, your survey people, the people that you do your market research on. But at that point, you would want to try to look at the competition. If there's anything out there that is doing something similar, you'd want to try to copy them as much as possible. Um, because they've already got a formula down, right? Like their thing is already successful. So
Hmm.
there's no copyright on UX UI, right? There's only copyright on the actual idea and the item and the branding.
Hmm. I respect that point, and just want to like elaborate on it. We're human beings and we learn by mimicking what we see other people do. And so whether I'm talking about like yourself trying to practice your design chops, it's totally okay to borrow from the existing like vocabulary in the general sense, not literal words, but this vocabulary of design ideas like the Connect wallet in the top right, for example. Not only would I recommend stealing that as a choice, I would literally recommend finding GitHub repos that already implement that code and fork it and then change like the color of the button only for a
Mm.
lot of reasons. People expect it to be that way. It saves you a bunch of time. Like, so there's no shame in like strategically borrowing from the like ecosystem of terms that already exists from a design perspective. Thank you, Memory Gardens.
Yes.
But I want to back up because we're moving very quickly. Space Falcon says Figma. What's Figma? What'd you say? So, could you introduce Figma, and then I'll pull up a window where maybe we could show people some of what Figma can do.
Yeah. So Figma currently is free. It did recently get bought by Adobe, so I am nervous that they will ask to have you pay. But Figma is like, it's just such a great platform where you can make a model of an app and you can run it. You can lay out a website, and in most websites, builders like Webflow, you can actually like take what you've made in Figma and bring it over into Webflow and like actually make it a real website. It's basically a great what is the word I'm looking for? Like practice tool and visual. It's a great way to like visually lay out what you're working on.
Mm-hmm. I think I've got a decent. Yeah. So I'll
Yeah,
go
Figma is
ahead.
awesome.
Boom. Oh, hello. And then nope. There we go. Bup. Great. Let's see. Fractal Visions, you said SWOT analysis of your competitors?
Yes.
What the hell is SWOT? You can't just say that. Beam says WYSIWYG brings up memories of Dreamweaver. I happen to know WYSIWYG means what you see is what you get, and you're referring to editors where you can like click bold and stuff and like actually see how it'll end up at the end of the day. but we got to start back at folks like me and Space Falcon who are like, what the heck are you talking about? So I'm going to grab Figma. Okay. How's this look? Great. Great. How about this? Even better. Look at us.
Even better.
No, this is better. So this is Figma. I'm not going to go through all of what it is. This is Figma's Figma Basics. So they made this, and it includes like a lot of getting oriented. Go make an account on Figma and you'll have access to the same file right out of the box. But what I want to show you, just so you can get a sense, is I would call this what I mean when I say high-res Figma click model. This is a little frame. You can literally like drag this stuff around. And this, as a designer, is something that you're creating to show what are your UI elements, what buttons do you have, how do they line up, what spacing do they have with each other, how much white space are on the side, and you could just drag and drop this stuff.
Yeah, and like you said, that is high level. You can do an even more rudimentary kind of version of that. Like you don't have to have pictures in it, but there isn't necessarily like a wrong way to utilize Figma when trying to figure out the design of your app or your website.
Memory Garden's hot take: Canva's better for SWAT. What the heck is no one is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? What is this? Okay. Okay, that your project faces. Is this the kind of thing you have time for during a hackathon? Like, I'm a fan of triage and minimum viable versions of things. Are we really saying this is core to... Okay, so this is when you want to like get serious, do your biz dev, get ready for your pitch deck. Got it.
Yeah, I would say
the template. Okay. Okay.
Always serious.
Always serious.
Hold on.
Okay.
1 second.
What on? Yeah, sure. This is chaos. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put this in another category in my brain. When people ask me, like, what are the skills you would need to do well at a hackathon? I have a couple categories in my brain. Front-end dev will always be in demand. If you walk into a room and say, I'm a front-end dev, people's heads snap, and they just, like, start walking over to you like, I have a really cool idea. Can you make it? Like, that's how it works. So learn React, and you'll never go out of style, at least in the next couple years. Then you've got smart contract developer. Like, okay, I know how to do Solidity. I can make the smart contracts. Is it an ERC20? Easy. Is it an ERC721? Easy. Is it something more custom? Okay, it can be done. I've got my tools like Remix or Hardhat or whatever. So you got front-end dev. You got smart contract dev. You have designer, which, as we've learned in this conversation, is two different things. UI, UX, and graphic design illustration. What should we make? And like, what pieces should it have, and how should those pieces look? Both of which are answered according to the user, basically. Mm-hmm. And then another one, let's just say marketer is a separate thing for the sake of paying respect to marketing. Marketing's super hard, as evidenced by the fact only 7 people are watching this. And then you have what I'll call maybe biz dev. Let's loop community into marketing. They overlap a lot. It's like getting your thing out there, engaging with people back and forth. It's a conversation. Then you have biz dev, making a good pitch deck, talking about the total market, being able to talk to VCs, potentially get seed round investments, having a strategy. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is this even a good business idea? All of these are completely different skill sets that are worth learning. I think a well-rounded person should know a little bit of all of them and then choose the one they think is the most fun to specialize in and find other people that they can talk to. If you're trying to do the like small business founder startup thing, you could just go join some big corporation or whatever if you want. That's fine. But in the context of doing a hackathon or being a startup founder, you're probably 2 to 5 people and need to know like what your lane is and also be able to switch gears and help out. Right? Yeah,
I agree. And if you're lucky, you have like a UX, UI, graphic designer, personnel in one. So that's real. That's possible.
Yes. So what would it take to learn the first half of design, UI UX, like interviewing users, doing a low res storyboard, beginning to say, here's what our thing might look like?
What would it take
What
to do that?
what do you need to do? Like if you could break it up into like, well, first you decide who your thing's for and what it does.
Yeah.
And then you go talk to them about similar things or whatever, and then you use the questions to create your rough draft. Like something like that. What's the high level? You bing bang boom.
Okay. High level version. Okay, so you pick your topic, you figure out your end user, you find competitors stuff, like competitive apps and websites. If you have the time. So like you figure out what works about those. You take those to other people, people tell you what they like about it, what they dislike about that. You take that, you develop your storyboard, you develop your Figma, you develop your pieces of paper. You bring that back to either those same people, that's fine, preferably different people, and you have them use it, and you get their feedback, make your edits, bring it to the developer, finish it up, make it look good.
Okay. So let me make sure I heard you. We'll do it in the context of an example. I recently went to a hackathon. I joined a team, and one of the team members had this idea. It's a Web3 Kickstarter. Already we are on the path you've described. It's like, okay, we're going to compare ourselves to Kickstarter. A lot of its features, even a lot of its UI. So I would pull up Kickstarter, remind myself all of its pieces, do a couple interviews with people. Hey, have you ever used Kickstarter? What did you like about it? What did you not like? And then as a result of that, okay, I'm going to basically steal or, be inspired by a bunch of how they already do things. Maybe I've got different projects on different cards, and then maybe a little fundraising goal. And you've got your initial rough draft of like, here's what this probably looks like. And then you eventually go up to ideally different people, maybe the same people, and say, hey, here's my ugly version of an idea I have. It looks a lot like Kickstarter, but I've made a few interesting choices based on some opinions I have and some research I've done. What do you think? And then you get even more feedback. They're like, well, I like what you've done with this. Why don't you have this other thing? And you're like, the other thing. And then you add that while you're still at this like quick and dirty, like literal pencil sketch version. Am I following that right?
Yeah.
Like low resolution. And then once you've got like, okay, it should have this, that, but not the other. You've locked that in. Then you shift gears into, so here are the pieces. How do I make them look pretty? And start putting a little more polish on things like color, spacing, and the visual elements to get closer to high res, all the way up to what I call pixel perfect. I've heard it referred to as like, here's exactly what I want it to look like on somebody's phone or computer. Right. And that's where design would stop. And the developer could open up that, Figma, Canva, whatever file that's pixel perfect and say, okay, this is telling me you want this button with this exact hex color, with this exact border radius rounding. I can do that. And then they either make their CSS files or sometimes probably these programs can generate a good chunk of that stuff, which is convenient, and turn your click model into your website. And that's where the designer like passes it off to developer.
Right.
Is that where it's done? Like the second the developer makes like their first version of the thing that looks exactly like it looked like in Figma, is the designer done with their job for the rest of the project?
Not necessarily. It depends on if we're just speaking the hackathon, like it depends on how much time you have left, right?
Good point.
But I don't think that a developer or a designer's job is actually ever done. There will always be something. When you have the finished product to that point, you take it back out again and you do more market research on it. And if you feel like you don't have time for that, then you let it go, but there will be feedback. You constantly want to be...
There will be feedback. You just might not be listening to it. People will have opinions, and they can complain to each other, or they can complain to you, and then you can use the feedback.
Yeah, exactly what Prain Daily was saying. It comes down to the audience and like how the audience interacts with it and how they appreciate it or they don't, or they have ideas about what they think it should look like and how it should work. Ideally, after the developer makes everything, you do another round of market research with another group of people you can continue to do that as many times over. Like you could do that like 8 to 20 times. There will always be feedback. There will always be somebody that has something. You just have to be able to say it's good. It's good enough. Like we got it to a point where like it works, it does what it does. It's intuitive enough. One day you'll get there.
Okay. Speaking of things that you may or may not have time for in your design process, you just mentioned one that's at the end. A moment ago, Memory Gardens, you asked about affinity mapping, which is way at the beginning.
Yes, affinity
I
mapping.
looked up a Google.
Anytime in the
I
beginning.
did a search. So what the heck is that?
It's kind of like my experience of affinity mapping. It's kind of like you have these groups with topics and you have the ideas that go into them. So like it depends on how you utilize it. So you could have, okay, so everybody had feedback on the menu, like the hamburger menu, and everybody said these things about that. And everybody had this feedback on the button, and everybody said these things about that. Or you could use it in the beginning where you're like, okay, these are the different types of buttons that we could use, and these how we all feel about those. Like it just depends on how you communicate, how you gather information, and yes, how you understand your user journey. I've used it at different points. I wouldn't say Affinity Map is like a must-have, but they're helpful, yeah.
Hey, Pay the Toll. Okay. Thank you again for the links. These links are super useful. I'm going to pull up that templates one you just dropped a second ago, Memory Gardens. So Memory Gardens offering another sort of like alternative path, if you will, under the time constraint of a hackathon. It's nice to skip as many steps as you can get away with. For example, you might decide we would love to have these 5 features in our app. Realistically, we have time to code up a working demo of 1 or 2, and then the rest we'll have during our presentation. We'll just pay lip service and be like, and up next on our roadmap, we're excited to implement X, Y, and Z, because you just didn't have time. So in that same way, one way you can save time in the context of designing your thing is to skip lots of decisions about how it looks, that second piece, the graphic design, by using libraries or templates that already exist and have made those decisions for you. So can you talk about the pros and cons of using a UI library where it's like they've made opinionated choices about like how buttons look, how nav bars look, how hamburger menus work, how the little cards work? What are the pros and cons of doing something like that? And just to do it justice, Memory Gardens is saying you could start with that, get your demo out, and then maybe go back and do a UI UX revision. So
yeah, the pros with that is like they're already broken down to the most basic usage. They're already pretty much all how we intuitively use those things and how they can look. I'm trying to think of like a good example. But like those buttons on that website that you're showing right there, they're like pretty basic. They're nothing special to them. They've changed some colors. That's great. They do the job. You're used to it. You know what they are. It solves the problem. That's the best part about using pre-made things. The worst part is just like, sorry. You can also, avoid unnecessary customization, and it's way quicker. It's faster. In terms of a hackathon, it's great to do that. The only con that I see out of it is literally just it's boring. Like you can't do anything fun. You're not going to be doing, well, not that you can't, but you're not going to be adding like color. You're just going to be smacking that on and you're going to be moving on, which is just totally fine for your first level, like your first 2 versions of whatever you're making. And especially like you don't need to show anybody anything 100% perfect in order to receive feedback on it. It doesn't have to be.
The example I'm showing here to like really flesh out this point is Tailwind UI. So Tailwind exists. Tailwind CSS is a styling system that allows you to do. I guess I have to back up a little bit. When you're making a website, you can either use raw CSS, which all websites use, or you might try to save some time by using a layer of abstraction that makes it so you don't have to interact directly with raw CSS. This is what I mean when I say a lot of front-end developers are allergic to design, specifically allergic to CSS. I don't want to learn all the different gray dash 500 and all the button rounded stuff. It's too much. It's too much. And so instead, they'll make a trade-off and say, if this were like 6 years ago, we'd say like Bootstrap, or more commonly today, I think things like Material UI, which comes out of Google. Google has put a lot of thought into how to make a button. And so if you want to just let Google make that decision for you, you could use something like Material UI. Pro, a bunch of other people have put a bunch of time into making them look good for certain reasons you don't even need to understand to be able to just say button, and then boom, you have a whole button. Con, even if you learn how to customize those elements, like change the color of the button, you're doing it in Material UI's language. You're still not using CSS. And so even then, you're locked into a certain limited vocabulary of what you can change if you don't want to start all the way over from scratch, which you probably won't. Tailwind allows you to have it's a little like, I'm going to make a really rough analogy I'm not qualified to make. Tailwind in the context of styling seems a lot like Rust, in that you can use something like Tailwind UI to just say Tailwind UI button, and then you just get this button A I'm showing right here, right out of the box. But because Tailwind already has very CSS-like syntax where you can just be like green 500, opacity 50, rounded corner 50, they're like one-to-one with the different CS things. Like I could go find some website that shows you like how to go between CS and Tailwind. It has all of the power of CSS. So you can have your UI elements from Tailwind UI if you want to move fast, and then also customize them as much as you want using Tailwind itself down the line without having to start over. Just like Rust allows you to have as much abstraction as you want, while also allowing you to go all the way down to like machine level when you need to. So that's my clumsy analogy of what Tailwind and Tailwind UI, the component library, how they play together.
Yeah. Cool.
So I intend to learn Tailwind if and when I get to the part of my learning journey in public where I need to learn how to make website pretty, because I don't want to just learn Material UI and be like the Material UI guy, because then if I ever join some other team that's like, we don't use that, then I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know styling at all then. I want to actually learn styling. Like, how do you make these things cute? How, like, on hover, it turns gray. How do you do that? That's cool. Or like this transition, like not only does it go from one state to another, it slides in between, and it slides at a certain speed. And it probably also like speeds up and slows down. Like it goes whoop. You could like play with all those. I don't know, that's cool. I find the graphic design part of easier to think about than the UI UX user story part. That part's hard for me to think about.
That's fair. I think like one of the key things people don't realize for the UX UI is that it's not about the polished finish. It's about just getting from point A to point B. And I think people get too obsessed with the polished finish, especially for a hackathon. Like, yes, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to make it look the best you can, but you should stay in your comfort zone. And you should make sure that you put out the best product and presentation of what you're doing instead.
So let's take a moment to talk about what you can do before a hackathon to be ready, which pieces you can either practice or plan ahead of time, and then which parts make more sense to do during. To come back to an idea from a few minutes ago, I forget exactly who, somebody in chat was saying, well, what if you, I think it was Memory Garden, like what if you did some of your user interviews before the hackathon started? Because technically the rule is you're not allowed to submit any lines of code that were written before the event starts.
So
That
you
doesn't
could,
mean you can't start talking about your idea with other people in like our team formation channel in Discord. Shout outs to discord.gg/sporkdow. You could share ideas you have, and people could be like, oh, that's a cool idea. All right, we agree on the idea. We've got a couple team members. Keep it moving. Okay, you do your user interviews. All right, now we've got our, what was it called with the sticky notes that we saw a second ago?
the affinity map.
Affinity map. Okay, now we make our prototype. Maybe we get some feedback. Then we make our low res wireframes, like you just said, memory gardens. Okay, then we get feedback. Okay, now we're doing high res. You could do as much of this design work as you want ahead, and I don't think anyone would say you were breaking the rules or that that's unfair. And yet no
No.
one's doing that.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder, is it mostly because people find their teams well at the event?
A lot of people do. A lot of people do.
But I mean, I guess you could do all that work with your idea, and whether you end up using your idea or you're going with somebody else's on your team, you still have that work done. You can still go back to that idea another time,
Right.
another hackathon, or at Denver the following year.
Right. So if you have an idea, if you're confident, here's what I want to build at the next hackathon I go to. If you have the UI UX chops that we're discussing today, even without anyone's support, you could begin to go do, check out competitors, start jotting down notes of things you want to copy, maybe even do some Figma stuff, do some interview stuff. Or if you have an idea and you have none of those skills, you know exactly what kind of person you're looking for to partner with to do some of those things. Hey, I'm looking for somebody that can help with UI UX, user stories, all that. Great if you know Figma, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, you could find that person on our Discord and they could start now.
They definitely could. Yeah. And then on the dev side, I'd also like to take a moment to connect to what we were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of stuff could you do ahead of the event that's totally above board? Like truly, not even like some loophole. Like I highly encourage to do these kinds of things. Learn your craft. Just be able to, like, if somebody's on your team and they're like, all right, we need a nav bar. Just like having made several nav bars before and having those reps of practice where you're like, oh, okay, I need to make a nav bar component. I'll go copy it from this other project I did one time to save myself, some extra overhead here. And then I go import it. Oh, and then the colors, I'm going to go change it like this because I've practiced styling things before.
Yeah.
So that's like knowing your craft.
The tools that you're using.
Right. That's knowing how to use the tools. I would also say that in a general sense, you are setting yourself up for success if you have specific repositories of code that you intend to go borrow pieces from. Like if you've done a few tutorials, and that's like if you're a self-taught developer like me, if you get to a hackathon and you're like, oh, I need a button. Where was that one time I've made buttons before? And you go open up that code base and grab that, like, here's how to make a button part. That's kind of like the beginning of what I'm saying, but a more sophisticated version of what I'm saying is to have a repo of code on like GitHub or whatever that you've intentionally created as your own kind of starter kit. It's already got the main app. Like think Create React App. When you run Create React App, you get like a bunch of files and stuff. And it's already like a pretty simple app that's like, welcome to React. And it's got a few pages. Take that, take it a step further. Integrate Tailwind and Tailwind UI if that's the direction you want to go for styling. Know where the files are and how to change the colors. So when you finally get to join a team and they're like, hey, we want a nav bar and this page has 3 cards that have buttons like this, you're like, no problem. I already have my nav bar. I already have my UI elements to go make the cards. And it's just like bing, bang, boom. That's the part you can do ahead of time, is to just have all the pieces. So like my analogy to working with like tools in a wood shop would be, it's one thing to know how to use the tools. It's another thing to have the tools there. If you know how to use the tools, but you don't have the tools, you're like, well, great, I got to go buy the tools. And that's the equivalent of like going to download the repo or like pull up some tutorial. Like also have them right in front of you. So one of my goals for our community to make not only the learning something we do, how to use the tools, I also hope that we could work together to create something like a hackathon starter kit repo where it's like, okay, what basic, like spork this code, like go ahead and spork a copy of this repo for yourself. What does it need to have? Probably It's in React. Probably it needs a styling system. Maybe we're opinionated. We say it's Tailwind. We just commit to that. You want to use something else? That's fine, but we use Tailwind here. And then, oh, it probably has a Connect Wallet button. Let's just set that up from the beginning. If they're all going to have a Connect Wallet button, well, let's just make that. And so you get as far as you can in what you would call like a general purpose repo. And then it's a fine line because you start crossing into like, the Connect Wallet button was created before the hackathon. But Scaffold ETH exists, the Austin Griffith and BiddleGiddle framework, and people use Scaffold ETH all the time for hackathons, and that's intentional. It's intentional that you're not starting from zero. You're not creating the internet from the ground up. Even if you're using React, React code was written before the hackathon. So it's like there's an understanding that there's a gray area. What your buttons look like, the format of your page, maybe even the colors you're using, and you're like, okay. But I didn't have a team yet. And then we came together and said, oh, here's the idea of the project. Here are the pages we need. Here's the specifics. And then you do the specifics. And so, I don't know. In a court of law, there's no like hard line. Like, no, you have to go up to here and no further before the hackathon. But I just wanted to like expand on the idea that as the dev, one thing you can do to be very, very, very ready is to not only have your skills honed, but to show up with your sort of like starter kit or 2 or 3 different ones, depending on what kind of a thing it is, to be like, all right, I'm going to hit the ground running. Yeah.
Yeah.
Space Falcon says, maybe the line is for the smart contracts. If you're, even then, dude, like if you're making an ERC20, the whole point of ERC20 is that it's a standard everyone uses. I'm being hyper. No, it's a great question. Like if your custom smart contract was written before, you're cheating. But if you're taking ERC20 and like adding 1 or 2 things to it, of course, all of the stuff that was before you was already written. You should not be reinventing the wheel on what an NFT is. There's a reason we have a standard. It's so everyone knows what to expect. Buy, sell, transfer, mint, admin. Like, you should not be writing any of that for security reasons and for speed reasons. But then if you want to add one custom thing under there, like you change how royalties work, or you add some kind of burn function so people could burn them for some novel reason, like when you destroy your NFT, then this other cool thing happens. That would be new. That's the part you write during the hackathon. But it's just an interesting little gray area to play with. So let's shift gears into I am interested in going from 0 to hero and being able to walk into a hackathon and say, I am a designer. I've got 2 months until ETH Denver. That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
Even if I have a full-time job, that's a lot of free time.
Yeah.
What should I prioritize to be ready to contribute in a meaningful, simple way over the course of 1 or 2 weeks to a team as a designer? Like, what skills should I learn and how should I go about learning them?
As the UX UI or graphic?
Let's answer them each in turn.
Okay. As UX UI, I would say using Figma and really laying down really figuring out like how the product is going to be used and getting that research done ahead of time and really learning Figma. Yeah.
Like finding some kind of a YouTube or Udemy course on basic Figma, for example.
That would probably be the most helpful in terms of like a really quick way of showing everybody in your group and getting group feedback on design.
So I don't mean to endorse any particular video, but I'm just making sure I understand you correctly. Boom. So I searched like Figma course UX Figma course. So something like this, UI UX design essential training on Figma, so that you could create a mobile app, but using, it's not just, drag and drop buttons. It's also this UX part. Probably has reuse design elements for future projects. We were just talking about that.
And then
there's a personal
well, it
plan.
kind of depends on if you
What?
know, like if you're going into this knowing what the project is that you're going to be working on, then you definitely want to know other products, other related products. I guess if you don't know what the product is going to be, you should at least learn some really popular apps, right? And the way that they
Yeah.
work, and really pay attention to what you're doing on your phone intuitively, like the way that you're using buttons, the way that you're moving through pictures, going through apps, going through websites, like noticing and understanding how you as a user simply are navigating a website or an app, and talking to anyone and everyone about either your idea and your product, or like their pain points when using apps or websites is also a good way.
Okay, but that's like, let's saying you have a sense of what you should be doing and you've done some of this basic learning. That's where what you're talking about comes in. Like, so go out there and start talking to people and beginning to gain that kind of insight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you don't know what the product you're going to be doing is, though, too, just like pay attention to how do you interact with your own phone.
Oh, Memory Garden has an idea of what people can do between now and ETHDenver. Make a book of work for a mock project, sort of like a portfolio. Like even if you've got nothing and it's not even a real project, just beginning to compile this training you're doing in this portfolio-esque thing, so that when people are like, "What do you do?" and you're like, "I'm a designer. Here is my website." It's like, "Oh, okay." Like, it's clear that you're fairly new at this, but I'm fairly new at making smart contracts, and so that makes sense. Let's work together. Oh, true. Memory Gardens is talking about how, like, if you're doing mobile, there's a lot to learn specifically to either Android or iOS. The nice thing about Udemy is you can, for a very small amount of money, get a white man to explain almost anything to you. Like, I'm not wrong. I have yet to see a single face that's not a white man. Hey, it's Material UI. I mean, you could be opinionated. That's the nice thing about hackathon teams, is they're so small. Like, if you do, instead of React, like Angular, that's fine. If you're the only front-end dev, you can do whatever you want. You can do Svelte. Like, nobody cares as long as you make the website. But if you're trying to work with other people, probably you want to pick the one that, like, more than 60% of people know, instead of the one that, like, 15% of people know. Yeah, Memory Garden's right. You very much like going to the gym. This is why I like to be very intentional. And frankly, like, if you are gonna follow through, 15, even $80 or $100 is nothing compared to many, many hours of quality curated content, intentionally designed and edited to be high quality, to guide you from start to finish through some kind of sensible path. If you use it. That being said, part of what I'm getting at, Laura, is like, we're going to be doing these every week, and I want to actually learn this stuff instead of just talking about learning about it. So how would you recommend? My avatar is self-taught developer. I got some free time. I could spend $500 or less on this. Is this how I do it? Maybe I get a Udemy and just sit down and plug away at it week after week?
I have not looked into Udemy. I mean, sure, why not?
I mean, it's just like a Coursera platform.
Yeah.
They're like pretty high quality. I mean, at least the popular ones are. Like, the ceiling on how good these get is pretty high from a production perspective. They're not BS. Like, look at that. Look at that. It's at the angle. What is this, a Kickstarter video? And then
yeah, I'd be curious to see if they have any videos on UX UI
Design.
research and
Mm-hmm.
wireframes and things like
Mm-hmm.
that too. Because I would
Mm-hmm.
start there before you jump directly into Figma, since there is so much time.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And ideation too.
Okay. Well, let's go ideation, wireframe. Hmm. Still giving me this Figma one.
It's because the word wireframe, because you can do wireframes in Figma.
Ah. Learning now. Praying daily. I love you. It's good to see you. Okay, well this one keeps being on top and it's a bestseller, so let's give him a shot. I'm gonna share the tab, including audio, and we'll see the 3 minutes. Is that worth our time? Because what I'm getting you as someone who's been through a much more formal and robust amount of training back in your coursework, I'm asking you to give a perspective on whether something like this is getting at the same things we're talking about in a more concise way for somebody like me.
It very well could. Yeah.
Okay, so let me try sharing again. Da-dun, da-da-dun, da-da-ding, da-da-boom.
UX UI has become increasingly popular in the last couple of years. The last time I looked into it, there wasn't actually a degree or a college offering courses. They were mostly certificates. And so they would be in some sort of, they were all in some sort of frame of like once a week for a certain amount of months. So
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me if you can hear this or not. Sweet. Why? What? Oh, it's so indie.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Scott, and welcome to Figma Essentials. Together, you and me are going to learn everything we need to know to get started as a UX designer in Figma. We'll use this UI UX design tool to create beautiful interfaces. We'll also create some engaging prototypes, and also we will look into the real-world expectations of you as a new UX designer. Now this course is aimed at people who are new to design, new to user experience design. Even if you're not even that entirely sure what UX design actually is, don't worry, we're going to start right at the beginning and work our way through step by step. First, we'll describe the brief and how to work UX persona. Then you'll learn how to create really simple wireframes. From there, we learn how to implement colors and images properly in your high fidelity mockups. You'll learn the do's and don'ts for choosing fonts for web and mobile apps. You'll learn how to create icons, buttons, and all sorts of UI components. You'll learn all the scary terms like component sets, constraints, and multi-dimensional variants. They're all very easy once you get to know them. We'll also make our lives easier by using free UI kits and plugins for Figma to speed up our workflow. We'll build a simple style guide ready for colleague or client handoff. You'll know how to make both simple and advanced micro interactions, page transitions, and animations.
Wow.
Before the end of this course, you'll have fully interactive prototypes ready for user testing, all the way through to collaborating with other team members and exporting the right files ready for handoff to your developer or software engineer. You've got assignments that I set throughout the course so that you can practice and develop your skill, plus you'll have something unique for your portfolio at the end. All right, it is time to upgrade yourself and go from Figma Zero to Figma Hero. So sign up and I'll see you in class. Now, the shirt.
I'd say that would be very helpful.
This shirt made a whole lot of sense. It makes a whole lot of sense later.
Okay, I get it. He's cute. So that leans pretty heavy on the design side. I wonder how much he covers in the beginning some of the other stuff.
And that might have to be something we dig into to find the right thing.
Yeah, I wish there was like a curriculum thing. A UX persona. What do y'all think? Like Memory Gardens and Praying Daily, and Space, if you're still here. What would be useful? Because our intention for Design Thursdays, of which this is the first of potentially many to come, is that it be useful to us in having conversations about or going through tutorials about design and getting better at it together week over week. And so would y'all be interested in going through some kind of a like series like that together, one piece at a time? That's how I'm doing Smart Contract Mondays. We're going through Patrick Collins' Free Code Camp thing. That's how I'm doing, what did I call it? Front End Wednesdays. We're learning React together. And so I'm wondering if something similar might make sense for design, if we had some kind of a, course or resource that we could just like plug at week after week.
I might have found a video. I dropped it in your site.
Let's go.
Maybe.
Simple and Nilcha's in. Simple, are you in our Discord? I don't recognize your username. Maybe you use a different name. UX design process for beginners. Okay. 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 UX design process from user research to usability testing. What the heck's usability testing?
It's when you put the prototype in front of somebody and they always tell you.
Welcome to my course
Got
about user
it.
experience design process, and this course I'm going to simplify this process for you. Now I have seen tons of different user experience design methods, user experience design technologies that are circulating online, and when a newbie like me or like you, when they start learning something, they get confused that how I'm going to start my user experience design process. Now I want to build an app or an e-commerce store. Where should I start my user research? What is the information I'm going to get from it? How I'm going to form that information into personas, into user stories, and into different affinity diagrams and all that stuff. So in this course, I'm going to go from step by step from step 1, which is user investigation and research, and then we are going to go to step 2, design. We are going to make sense of that user data we have collected, and we are going to form in the end. The end result will be our wireframes, which we will deliver to our designers and development team. Now we are going to also make different business decisions that which feature we should build or which feature we should not build. So these are all the things we are going to cover in this course. If you are a beginner, this is a project-based course, so don't need to worry about it. We need to build an e-commerce store from user research to actually creating wireframes for this e-commerce store.
Said fancy
really
forks.
If you have any questions regarding this course,
Why
you
did
can
it say
always
fancy
ask
forks?
me. You can put your comments or suggestions, or if you want something more from me, you can always ask me. I can add into that course. So I hope you will learn a lot along with me in this course. So let's start designing some awesome user experiences.
Oh, thank you, Mohammed. Wait,
That'd be cool.
no, I don't
Laura will
want the
play
introduction.
the designer, and Derek or someone from the audience can play the user.
That is a fantastic idea. And then
I want Derek to do designs too. We could both be the designer.
here we go. Come
I
on,
sent you
Mohammed.
another one that might work too.
Okay. I just have to get this joke out of my system.
The fancy forks.
It said fancy forks.
It did say fancy.
Or did it say frocks?
It's
We're looking at a lot of frocks.
Frock.
It was frocks.
Aw.
Okay, it's about dresses. That makes more sense. I thought there was like a spork joke in here.
There could have been. That would have been great.
Yeah, oh, Memory Gardens beat me to it. Fancy forks to spork. I don't know if you got your rainbow spork from ETH number 2022.
Oh, hells yeah, I did. I made sure.
This other one you sent me? All memory cards. You have yours? So, I mean, here's another way we could approach it. Completely different. Because I appreciate Memory Gardens where you're trying to have us go, which is like, well, we could go through these step by step. It's a bit academic, you know, let's get our hands dirty. Even the ones that are like project based, they're good for the foundations if that's what you're looking for. But maybe we can skip to just doing it. So in that context, one thing jumps to me: the trait swapping for the Bufficorn Beetle Brigade. It's already live in a closed beta. You can apply at swap.bufficorn.com. I encourage you all right now, try swap.bufficorn.com. You only need to submit 500 spork or staked spork. If you don't know how to stake spork, let me know. I can talk more about that. To be a part, of the closed beta. And you get unlimited swaps once you're a part of the closed beta, which is fantastic. And the idea of trait swapping is to be able to customize your Bufficorn to show off your personality, right? It's this like avatar that represents you in digital space, blah, blah, blah. We just launched a closed beta because we are in an agile sprint to get this thing to a place where we're proud to show it to people by ETH Denver 2023 in late February. I'll show the website actually.
Did you get accepted?
I did. Thank you for checking. That is an important piece. So, where's my share screen? Da-da-doom. There we go. So, after a couple months, we are at a place where swap.bufficorn.com, which, oh, come on, Derek. There you go. Swap.bufficorn.com is live. The link Praying Daily is swap.bufficorn.com. And you can interact with this website. It's got a background Laura and I could tell you stories about. It's got flavor text at the bottom I could tell you stories about. It was built by Raid Guild. Shout outs to Raid Guild. We love them. And if you want to use it, you have to connect your wallet. Sure enough. Oh, look at that. Sure enough. A very familiar design flow. You can't see my pop-up, but I connected my MetaMask, and ta-da. And so in this way, it actually does not look good at certain. That is design feedback. That is definitely design feedback. Oh, and then it is certain width that changes to top and bottom. But this looks bad, right?
Call that collapsing. You're collapsing the website.
Collapse at a certain width, which also gives you mobile version out of the box if you hear of all these widths. So good. So this is all custom. Literally nothing was pre-made UI elements. So over on the left, it's my Bufficorn. I'm going to swap with myself. So the Bufficorns, I could choose to take this one and swap its hat with this one. And then confirm. This is actually the first swap I've done. Okay, a little MetaMask thing popped up that I'm sure you can't see. I'm signing it. No gas. No gas cost for this. I sign with the wallet to prove that I am the owner of these Bufficorns. And now we are taken to a swap completed page. You can see they have already swapped visually here. I'm given this like visual confirmation. And you see a lock icon on the top right that has a clicky on hover, but you can't actually click it. That's disorienting. And
feedback.
You confirmed this swap, and then sure enough, you just links to Etherscans for my wallet. This was not an on-chain transaction. That's why it was gas-free, and it's also why it was instant. Because Memory Gardens, what are you talking about? The blue icon? Can't see, too small, blue on blue. See, this is why we need you in the closed beta. Memory Gardens, go to swap.bufficorn.com and fill out the form to get on the closed beta. In fact, all of you do it, truly. I want all of you to be not only using this thing, but giving us feedback. Because what I want, and the reason I'm showing you this, is I want that next Thursday when we do this, we have a designer, such as the Raid Guild designer, Benison, he's amazing, and a user, such as Memory Gardens or Pay the Toll or Simple Anilcha or Praying Daily, talking to the designer about their experience of using the dang thing. Ideally, it's your first time using the thing, and you're just like talking out loud about like your first impressions. Because our designer critically needs that feedback right now to make this better before ETH Denver, which we only have 2 months until. So you can see there's a little bit of urgency here. I think having a real designer talk to a real user about a real product that's ours, that we have a real timeline to make better before the event, is a good use of our time. What are you saying? Memory Garden says, the Bufficorn Beetle Brigade trait swapper has a 500 spork fee. You can send 500 spork or spork, which stands for staked spork, to the following address on Ethereum mainnet or on Polygon, probably on Polygon. Yes, to get into the closed beta, it is after all closed, you need to submit 500 spork or staked spork to that address, and then in your application to be a part of the closed beta, paste the link of the transaction where you sent the 500 spork, just to say like, hey, my wallet is this, and then here's the transaction where that wallet sent 500 spork to you. From there, there's no per swap fee of spork or DAI or ETH or anything. It's off chain. So you can do an unlimited number of swaps once you're in and have given us that 500 spork. If you don't have 500 spork, just go get it. It's not hard. It's actually alarmingly easy. You do need all your Bufficorns in whatever wallet gets approved. Yes. Pay the toll. I can't see your question. And unrelated, yes. For legal reasons, I don't know that exists. Come on, Memory Gardens. It's really not hard. Trust me. Like, it's not. Yeah, how do I...
Swap.bufficorn.com.
Yeah,
I had to fight them on that. They wanted to do swap.bufficornbiddlebrigade.com, and I was like, absolutely not. There's too many words.
No, absolutely not. Talk about bad design. Let's share my screen. This time I'll do the window so it shows the thing. There we go. Swap.bufficorn.com. Why is it not connected? There we go. Can you see it now? Great. There you go, Praying Daily. Memory Gardens, you're one of these many wallets people? Chaos. I have such fear in my heart for that strategy because I understand if you compromise... I mean, hopefully they're actually on different seed phrases, because otherwise if they're just like 10 accounts from the same seed phrase, then like you haven't gained much from like an OPSEC perspective. You lose the one seed phrase, people are going to create 10 accounts and see what they have. Why is there no Bufficorn logo on the left? Why are you saying these things? I'm not writing these things down, Memory Garden. This is... Okay, box of ledgers. That's what I figured.
Come back next week.
Memory Garden, will you do... Seriously, would you be willing to join next week's stream and just give feedback?
I almost feel bad for the designer to put them on blast like that. Usually there's like a layer, you know? There's another person.
Where it's not in public like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, we should totally do that. I would find that to be really hilarious.
Great. Memory Gardens, are you in our Discord?
Which one are you inviting? Which person?
Memory Gardens.
No, from Raid Guild.
Oh, Benison. Oh,
Benison?
Fart. I think he might be out of town next week.
That is
Memory
so
Gardens,
sad.
will you please either DM me or tag me in general or anything along those lines so that I have a little, notification to this, to remind me about this? I'm delegating. I'm displaying leadership ability.
Are you?
No, I'm just like in the middle of streaming and know that if I don't leave a breadcrumb for myself that I'll forget we had this conversation. And that's humility. Space Falcon likes the mountain background image. Do you want to tell that story? I mean, this is a semi-intimate setting. We can tell that story and get away with it.
Is it? It just took
I mean,
forever.
if we tell a tactful version of the story. Not from a personal perspective, but from a process perspective. The story is we had to go back and forth on this quite a few times.
There were many, many variations and very, very many minor changes and too many opinions.
Too many opinions. So from a project management perspective, it was challenging to get the people who were making the decision to efficiently respond to the people who needed their decision and feedback on the thing they were making. And so the designer would make a version, and then they'd have to wait for the feedback, and the feedback would be like, I don't know about this. And the designer's like, that was unclear feedback. Here's the second version. And then the person's like, no, I liked the first one better for these reasons. And it's like, okay. So then they tried to do like a middle ground. It was like, what if we change it completely in style and go from a hyper realistic thing to like a more subdued color palette? And can you make it nighttime, but also like bright, kind of like it's daytime? It's like, yeah, I can try. Make it prettier. And here you see, it's like, to me, very soothing. The greens, the blues, the purples, you have the stars. It's in a like rough, it's not hyper realistic, right? It's just these like swaths of solid color. I love this background.
It did end up looking really good, honestly.
And it was worth that back and forth, in my opinion. And
sadly, all of
we
that back
lost
and forth
time.
makes me hate it.
You just hate it on principle.
Yeah. It's too much.
Yeah. Pay the toll. We do have a GitHub ticket board for this project, and we are using it to keep track of issues, which will be is that the kind of thing you would keep track of for design feedback like this? Or would you do that in like Figma? Maybe like leave comments on the corresponding Figma board? I guess there's no wrong answer, but I'm curious what's like the most natural answer. I guess it depends on who's implementing the feedback. We have a design board. We leave tickets for the UX people to make changes often. Well, there you go. Maybe we could do it like that. Maybe we don't even need the designer from their team. We could just, as a family, go through it and open tickets. Beard oil. Well, that's fun. Okay. I'm petering out. How you doing, Laura?
I am also petering out.
Great. So what we've also learned is that 90 minutes is a more realistic time to set for this for next week than 2 hours. Yeah?
Probably.
Maybe 90 is even too much. No, 90 is good.
I think we should just leave it as like the 2-hour slot just in case we go over, but I think 90 is good.
All right, I'll leave it.
Maybe next week I'll be a little bit more prepared.
That's okay. I've really appreciated your willingness to jump in with me and just kind of shoot from the hip. You know, that's my style, is to like minimize prep time and maximize fun.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true.
We can meander. That's part of it. Okay, so let's close up. What have we discussed today? We had the first Design Thursday, hopefully of many. The second will be in the new year, next week on Thursday. And we talked at a high level, what is design? And broke it up into 2 categories. The UI UX user story interview research part, where you don't even make anything, or if you're making something, it's ugly, and you're making sure that it has the right pieces and is for the right person, and you're clear on all that. And then you transition into the second part, which is making it prettier. Graphic design, illustration, typography, and color theory, and so on. Both of those can be done in Figma, which is our tool of choice here. I decided, I guess. It's an industry standard.
Free.
Canva's good too. Nothing
Super
wrong with
easy to
Canva. They're both much easier than like the Adobe suite, is what I'm saying.
Correct.
So
and free.
we
Adobe
want-
is expensive.
Right. We want easy.
And Figma just has so many templates.
Yeah. And so for those
So
of us
many.
lazy newbies that are going to be self-taught designers, then our goal is to
Start.
understand some of these pieces enough to be able to do like to fumble through a quick version of being the designer at a hackathon like ETH Denver, where you show up and you're like, I'm going to do some user interviews, and then I'm going to go grab my UI library in Figma and start drag and dropping and copy pasting until I've got like my click model. And then everyone's going to be like, damn, that's a clean click model. How'd you do that? And you're like, I copy pasted a bunch of buttons from a design library. Thanks for asking. And it's not as hard as it looks.
Right.
So that's our goal, to be able to use a UI library in Figma to make our ideas come to life and to practice our skills so we know what we're doing, and then also have the tools available later so we know what like bookmark to open when we actually get there and it's game time. That is completely separate from what we just decided, which is to give feedback on swap.buffacorn.com, which has no UI library because every single component was hard-coded its styling from scratch, like the color, the roundedness, the on-hover, etc. Because Raid Guild does good work.
That took months. So that is not.
It took months.
Yeah, it's not.
But it's also a high priority to make it cuter. So we're going to spend some time next week talking about that. I believe the designer who lives in Europe and for whom this is a horrible time is not even available next week. So it's moot. We're going to keep it at the same time next week. And if we want to get him on board, we'll figure something else out later. So that's what we did today. We talked about design, summarized at a high level, what does it mean? And then at a low level, if you were going to try to learn some stuff over the next 2 months to be ready to participate as a designer, a beginner, then what would that look like? And now we've got a clear-ish path. Your low-res Figma click model all the way to your high-res Figma copy-paste UI elements. And then you pass that to your developer and you're like, go make this. And they're like, thank you for saving me the trouble of thinking about what it should look like. And you've played an important role.
Yeah.
Last question from Praying Daily, completely unrelated to design, but still a good question. How do you add S-Spork to your wallet?
Yeah,
That's
how?
a two-parter. That's a two-part question. One is, to take the question literally, how do you add S-Spork to your wallet? I'm going to find the address. I found it. I got you. There's the address. Import that address to MetaMask or your wallet of choice on Polygon. That's on Polygon. I do not think S-Spork exists on mainnet. For all intents and purposes, Spork only exists on Polygon. But for those of you that like this level of detail, it was minted on mainnet, and then every time we distribute it to people, we bridge it to Polygon and then disperse it. So it technically exists on both, but all the floating Spork that people have is on Polygon. Mainnet Spork happens to also exist. Was that your question, Praying Daily? Like, what's the address? Or do you also want how do you import a contract? Or do you also want how do I stake Spork and get any? Because I can do all those. I just don't know what you need help with.
There is a YouTube video that Russell made on our YouTube
Russell!
account that shows you how to stake Spork.
Let's find that video. That's one of our most recent videos.
Yes.
That's right. Great. So you're good. For anyone else that doesn't know, the way you create stake Spork with your not unstaked Spork, your Spork, is by doing that. Thank you, Russell Castanero, for making that video.
Jeffrey's the best.
Laura, I have a gift for you.
What's that?
Would you like a gold
One of your
star?
buff- Oh, I thought you were going to say one of your Buffacorns.
I really appreciate all of your help today. So if you're
Thank
willing
you.
to receive it, I would like to give this to you. Here you go. Really appreciate you. If
No,
only
I will. Payments are here.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for being here. Otherwise, I would have enjoyed this conversation all the same, Laura, but it does feel good that it was among friends and community that also appreciated it. So thank you for being here, Space Falcon and Praying Daily and Memory Gardens. And I know
Beam me
there's
up
one
now if
more.
he's still around.
Beam if you're there, you madman, and pay the toll. And there's one more. I know for a fact there's one more. Did I say Praying Daily already? Simple and Nilcha, that's who it was. Oh, Fractal Visions, you're still here. We have a contract on mainnet with Aragon client that has yet to be released. I wonder if we can bridge those circuits above it. Huh. Yeah, I will say, as a cautionary tale, from a comms perspective, the token being on two different networks is very
It's confusing.
confusing.
Yeah,
I do
it's
not.
really
I
hard
do
to
not
explain.
recommend.
No.
I recommend thinking ahead of time. What is your strategy, and whether
People
it makes
are
more
always
sense
like-
on mainnet or Polygon.
Yeah, people are always like, "Aren't you ETH Denver?" And then, but you're on Polygon, and then I'm like, ah.
Checkmate. Checkmate.
Ah.
Yeah. So thanks all for joining. We really appreciate you. Where can you stay in touch with us if you want to know what fun stuff we're doing next? I am
Twitter.
going to let Laura answer that while I
Discord.
pull up our community calendars link. Yeah, but go ahead and give
we
the
are on
things.
Twitter at Ethereum Denver. Our Discord, discord.gg/SporkDAO. We are on Instagram, ETH Denver. And you should definitely go on our website and join our newsletter, as I put out a lot of emails with all sorts of fun information about things like this. Which, Derek, we need to connect and make one for things like this. For this specifically. And then also
make what?
follow our Google community calendar. Which
Yeah,
Derek just
that's
sent
the
link.
smart one, because then
That's-
it's on your calendar
that's
and you can
most-
just hide it or show it, and it's a lot of
That's most
stuff every
up-to-date.
week. So it's
Ooh.
a much more consistent way of keeping
Yeah.
track of stuff than like hoping you see the tweet 2 hours before a thing happens, right?
Definitely.
We
And
also
then we have a
try-
community
Go ahead.
call to Discord on Friday.
I would love to see you all tomorrow on the community call at 1:00 Mountain Time. Neither Laura or I are actually in the Mountain Time zone, so we always have to do math in our head before we talk out loud about what time something is. That's okay. This is the 21st century, and a lot of us work remotely, don't we? Thank you all again for joining. I hope to see you in Discord, on Twitter, and on the next stream. I appreciate you. And thank you in advance, Memory Garden, for your help next week,
There's
giving
Beam.
feedback. Beam, were you here the whole time, or did you just sneak up?
Just
You
walk
had
away
us in the
from
background, or what? I love the fact that like there's roughly 7 people watching, and I know basically all of you, like through interactions during this stream. That means a lot to me.
Okay, so we expect every single one of them at the community call tomorrow.
Not only
Especially
that,
Beam.
I expect you to help us bring a friend to the next Design Thursday.
Everybody have a +1.
Everybody have a +1. Yeah. This is now a multi-level marketing scheme. You get 1 spork for each 3 people you bring.
All right, let's say goodbye another time, like for the 5th time, and actually leave.
Yeah, you're right. So the official, the formal goodbye in our community is for everyone who can to unmute themselves. This is how we do it on the community call, and say bye. So Laura, will you please join me in saying goodbye to people?
Yeah.
Bye.